Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Ratched, Season 1, Episode 1. It is simply called The Pilot, and because it is a first episode, we'll start spoiler free. We'll give you warning in the middle before we go into spoilers. But this is the new prequel series to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, coming from Ryan Murphy, starring Sarah Paulson. It's a Netflix original, so we're going to dive into this first episode and see what it's like. I think it's safe to say neither one of us were super excited about this, but we're both kind of ambivalent.
I think we were kind of ambivalent from the premise, because it's like, do we need this? The trailer, I think, put us in a worse place than ambivalent, I would say. We actively disliked the trailer, both of us.
Yeah, it's a weird one, because I haven't watched One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I've definitely not read the book, but I haven't watched One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest since it's been over 10 years, right? Maybe 15 even. So my memory of some specifics is hazy, but I certainly don't remember the character of Nurse Ratched being as outright manipulative in a scheming illegal kind of way. Maybe I'm just misremembering things. And I remember obviously having an attitude and being very unlikable because of the way she is with the patients, but I don't remember her doing almost like Vic Mackey or Walter White-esque schemes to try and get her way and all sorts of chaos things. But we'll get into it as we talk about the episode, because the first episode is largely her moving to the town where the hospital is and trying to get a job, and all of the ways she schemes her way into getting said job, as well as setting up some other stuff for the season as a whole. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah. So if you're not familiar with who the character is, it's the sort of primary antagonist from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which many will know as the Jack Nicholson movie, in which he goes to a mental hospital, and she is kind of this hard ass nurse who almost seems to be there to put the patients down and, in the way of actually trying to rehabilitate them, we'll say. This obviously, I think this show goes further than that. To the point where, as I was watching, I'm like, you know what, I didn't like Nurse Ratched in the movie, but I feel this is painting her more like a straight up villain.
Borderline evil.
Yeah, borderline?
I mean, sure, yeah.
she, I mean, we'll get into it in spoilers, but she does straight up nefarious shit in this, to the point where I almost was. I'm not just saying this because there was actually a show that did this, but it almost felt like I was watching like a Mrs. Bates prequel or something like that, where it was like, oh, it's a serial killer prequel.
Yeah, it's more what you'd have expected from that. Yeah, sure.
It feels more like one of those rather than the nurse from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But hey, hell, and for all I know, maybe the movie changed a lot to her character. Maybe the original book, maybe she is a lot more like that in the book. I have no idea.
Yeah, maybe the movie toned it down. And like I say, you've not seen it in a long time.
It's been a while.
I've not seen the whole thing. I've watched segments for various classes over the years, but again, not in 7 years. So again, been a while.
Yeah, and I'm getting this out of the way before we actually ask you what you thought of it and when we get to the quality, because I feel like this is almost a separate thing from the quality itself, because it might be good as what it is, but I think the discussion of what to expect from this as a connection to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and my preconceived notions get into it, I think are relevant to at least address, because it is very different. And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest has a lot of heart in it, but it's a very kind of... The atmosphere is very different to this. This is very pulpy. Everything's very colourful and bright. It really wants to have this kind of upbeat kind of pacing to it.
Old Hollywood style feel.
Yeah. The music doesn't quite have the in it, but you can imagine
as well.
It.
It's the constant, operatic strings kind of going the whole time, and to the point where at first I was like, "Hey, I like this music. I'm into it. It's got a style," and then it is unrelenting with the music. It never stops.
Yeah. So, yeah. What did you think, episode 1 then, of Ratched?
At one point in the episode, Ratched, I believe it's her, that says, "Life is unpredictable." Unfortunately, this episode at least is anything but. I felt, after the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, it kind of settled in. I was like, okay, it felt very predictable as to what it was going to be for the rest of the episode. Kind of settled into a groove.
Yeah.
And not a, it was okay, but let's say, just there's a lot of little things that built up that annoyed me over it. Like, I just hinted the music there, feeling like at first like, yeah, this is all right, and then by the end it kind of wore me down. There's a lot of things I feel like can add up to that feeling.
It's in a really weird place, which is kind of what I almost predicted just based on Ryan Murphy's other shows. Is that I expected to not dislike it, but not particularly like it either, and I'm kind of more or less falling into that exact groove with this, because the energy that it has as she's doing kind of nefarious stuff and watching her kind of her evil game plan unfold as you realize what she's doing, there is some fun to be had there, and it is very bright and colorful. And the limited amount of violence that we see, there's a sort of prologue sequence at the start that has a kind of a different type of side to the show to it.
Yeah,
that stuff's a little bit different and was almost, obviously not quite as tongue-in-cheek, but I was definitely reminded a little bit of Scream Queens and how it was, the attitude in the scene.
I can see where you're getting from in terms of the attitude of the action.
Yeah, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, all right, if it's going down this kind of path. And I don't know if I would ever have said I want a pulpy prequel series to Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but I mean, if I'm going to get a show about this, maybe, and I think Ryan Murphy, at least for my taste, has proven that he's at his best when he is being super pulpy and he is just having fun with things. And I can't say that this show isn't for the most part doing that. There's definitely some elements that I thought were tedious. There's it feels weird to call it a love interest subplot, but there's kind of the Corey Stoll subplot, I'll just call it. Didn't really get anything out of that particularly. I agree with the predictability of it. It's kind of this weird thing where by the time I get to the end, I'm like, I can almost see the great version of this episode where it is kind of doing your shady, I don't want to say anti-hero main character, but your character who's doing a lot of bad things, but you're kind of having fun, almost rooting for them to get away with all the nasty shit they're doing, and especially when it's complicated, because they're doing all these complicated things and you're like, oh, all right. By the end, I kind of felt exactly what I thought I was going to feel, which is I don't hate it, I don't love it. It's kind of in this weird middle ground where I appreciate some things, but it's a full hour long though. I will say this: it could have easily cut like 15 minutes, and
that
was the thing.
I feel like this is at least the second Ryan Murphy thing on Netflix where we've gone cut it down.
A Politician being the previous example.
Yeah.
By the way, I saw in the credits at the end it said Sharon Stone. I'm like, I don't remember seeing Sharon Stone. Turns out she wasn't in this episode. She's uncredited.
Okay.
She's in here, but it's credit only. I mean, this one. Yeah. She's a regular, but she's not in this first one.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing her. Vincent D'Onofrio, I remember.
Very much so.
Because,
quite the imposing figure.
Well, he's always got that look. Ever since Jurassic World, I can't help but think of him as the dad walking towards the barbecue buffet. He has that look to him at all times.
Yeah.
That. Reggie Corey Stoll, of course, in a small role. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to sound like down. Like it's not terrible. Like I said, there's a lot of little small things that build up to my feeling of just kind of being a bit worn down by it at the end of the hour. But it's not like bad. And there's definitely things I like. The acting, pretty much across the board, is pretty good. I really like the architecture of the building. The mental hospital. I don't mean the outside. I mean the way it plays with the geography of the interior of it. Kind of it moves around in some fairly inventive ways that I think it's already kind of showing off that I think has potential.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we're going to talk about more of the actual details and spoilers, but I'm struggling to actually think of anything else I want to say in spoiler free, to be honest.
It's probably one of the shortest spoiler free sections ever then.
I don't really have much else to add about like how the show feels or whatever. It's a Ryan Murphy show and it feels like a Ryan Murphy show.
I will say, there are points where it's overly colourful. Like I like colour and I like having colour, but there are points where it kind of goes overboard to the point where I was questioning if things were real or not, at least at one moment, where it felt like so surreal because of the colour and the lighting rather than what was happening.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was actually thinking my TV settings were a bit off because at one point some of the color in one of the scenes was popping so much in one place with the Dolby Vision that I thought, wait, that's too bright. There's something wrong with the color. It's just too, it's too strong.
It's intense at points.
Yeah, uncomfortably so. So, but clearly that's by design. That's clearly something that they're going for.
It's not a mistake. It's just not necessarily something I like.
Yeah, we should probably talk about Sarah Paulson herself a little bit, given she is the title character. It's funny because I think most people do know her from American Horror Story and other stuff that she's done with Ryan Murphy. Because I saw her in a couple of like small roles over the last couple of years, but that's really where she made her name. Because when she showed up in like Bird Box, where it was like, people, oh, that's Sarah Paulson. I'm like, who? From what? And they're like, oh, she's American Horror Story seasons. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, fair enough.
Makes sense, which, does have a pretty sizable audience as a show.
Yeah. So, I think she, as this kind of, stern character who can basically talk her way into just about anything and come out making the other person look like an idiot.
She's a top-class bullshitter.
Pretty much. She's basically... She's kind of like a confident, humorless Better Call Saul.
Kind of, yeah.
Take away the kind of skeevy, kind of joking his way to try and like salvage the mess he's made, and turn it into more a confidence. No matter what, like, I'm going to make the other person sound like an idiot. That I'm in the right.
Just talk a way through it and bluff here or there, and just go with it until they kind of relent.
Yeah, that's it. It does kind of have the problem that some anti-hero shows can have, which is I'm not really sure who I'm rooting for exactly in this episode.
Yeah,
I never really felt like I cared about any character in that way. So I don't.
It's a bit of a disconnect, isn't there?
Which might not be a problem overall in the long run, but it's one of those things where I feel it where, okay, they want me to be intrigued with what's going on, what her motivations are, what's she up to, and by the end of the episode, there's a kind of a, it does have that episode 1 hook at the end where it kind of gives you something to go, oh, hey, there's a new element introduced at the end that makes you go, okay.
Credit to it there.
So I think as a pilot, it's quite effective in that it clearly gives us a good introduction to who she is, all of her stuff to try and get into the hospital as a nurse, all gives you a good sense of what she's willing to go through and what she's willing to do to people in order to do it. And then the ending kind of reveals this new element. So as a pilot, it's quite effective, even if I do think it's a bit overlong. But
I think like I say, it's hard to root for anyone where she's already quite far over the line. Not that long into the episode, really. Like, she's already towing the line pretty early.
Yeah, like a lot of anti-heroes, like, they'll start off being a bit more, tipping into shades of grey. And then, so you care about them, so by the time they go full dark, you kind of, it's like there's a progression there. You see kind of how they've fallen from grace to get to that point. And even though you might not root for them anymore, you're so invested in who they are and the people around them that you're into. Or, I mean, maybe Saul, Jimmy McGill's a different example where there's enough sort of genuine heart to him where he does have a moral compass and there is something in there that is good about him. So there is something to root for.
Whereas this here, like, by the end of this episode, the things that she's done already, I'm like, well, how much lower can we go?
Yeah, we can't say till spoilers, but she does some pretty bad stuff in this episode. And it does have some hints as to like her backstory and why she is the way she is, why she has a specific attitude towards sex specifically is kind of brought up a lot. And that wasn't in the movie. She did have an attitude when it came to any kind of sex. But so clearly there's going to be some attempt to back end in some empathy as to whatever her backstory is, perhaps. But I don't know if that necessarily makes me root for her or anyone else. And because there's a nurse who's at the hospital who's kind of like doubting her at all times and is kind of confrontational. Arguably is the antagonist as much as we have one right now in this first episode. But it's not like we're really rooting for her either, because we still want the show to happen. If she gets her way, then the show just doesn't exist, and the story stopped dead. So it's hard to find someone to kind of latch onto, and which I think works really well in a movie. It's a little bit more of a problem in a TV show where, okay, I'm expected to sit around for 10 episodes with these characters.
Is this 10 or is it 8?
I don't know. I was just guessing.
Okay, fair enough. I thought it was 8, which is why I questioned. But I mean, I'm not certain. But yeah, the point stands. This is if it is 8, it's what 3 to 4 times as long as an average movie. That's quite a lot of time to sit and invest in something without that attachment. That you, like I say, you can get away with it in a movie, whereas this is a different medium, and there are different rules in terms of audience engagement.
Yeah. Well, I think being invested in the characters where you want to, and I get that there is something to watching a villainous character finally be caught or finally get caught, brought down a peg or two or things like that. The problem is, though, when it's meant to be an ongoing series, which this has already got a season 2, it's worth mentioning, so it's definitely not ending in 8 episodes.
Well, we've got to get to the movie yet.
Yeah. So it has to go to at least 16 episodes, so there's a concern where it's just dragged out too long as well. And I know that's a bit unfair to say, oh, maybe it'll drag it out too long. We've only watched one episode. It's a bit... But, it's one of those caveats.
I think that's something that is because of how high it sets the bar in terms of where she's at, what she's willing to do. It feels like, okay, how long can we go with any sense of progression, of escalation in what she does? Because it's already like, I mean, how far can you go in, all right, 16 episodes and feel like things are escalating still?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether there is left for her to go, and I'm sure they've got some stuff up their sleeve because they do have 7 more episodes, but I'm not super excited by the prospect. Admittedly, I didn't think this was a bad time to watch, though. I thought it was relatively, candy cotton visuals for the most part, with some, funny moments sprinkled throughout. Like, it wasn't like a bad time. It wasn't like a horrible hour of time spent watching this.
We've watched far worse episode 1s from Netflix and elsewhere, even recently.
Yeah, I it's the sort of thing where if I did have more time, I could see myself putting this on to binge as background noise while I'm doing something else, because it would be fine to just consume that way. The thought of watching this one at a time and talking about it in depth afterwards, I have no interest in doing that.
No, there's no appeal to that. I doubt I would ever even put it on as background noise, honestly, for this.
Yeah. Honestly, my impression is that it's pretty, dare I say, solid, trashy TV. And if that's insulting to you, I don't know what to say. But it is. I think it is quite trashy. But is trash go? Is it's quality trash?
But I mean, Scream Queens was trashy, right?
True.
We love that.
Yeah.
So we're not opposed to the trash.
Yeah. And that was more of a straight up comedy, though, which is why I think you get away with all the characters being mostly awful to each other.
Yes, because it's you're laughing at them intentionally every time that someone does something terrible. Whereas here, that's not the feeling. There is supposed to be some connection. Like I say, it's teasing this mysterious backstory of like, okay, why is she this way? It's teasing empathy, but it's already at a point where, what can you do to make me empathize now with her? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you can.
Well, let's say spoilers then from here on out. So full spoilers, so we can talk about what she actually does, because in the course of this episode, she actually doesn't have a real job interview. She just sort of fakes a letter and shows up, suspecting that she can just bluff her way in. She comes in wearing a very nice, suit. She comes in and she basically argues with the head nurse until she can speak to the not manager. That's
doctor.
Head doctor. Yeah. But she talks to him, very impresses him quite greatly. But he's like, well, yeah, but we don't actually have a position. So I mean, I'll keep you in mind if something opens up. But you've impressed me greatly, but ultimately I don't have anything open for you, which is why there was never any job interviews going in the first place. And she happens to walk in on one of the nurses having sex, which this was the scene that I'm assuming you thought was a dream sequence, because I wasn't sure if this was real either.
Yeah, until afterwards, where they're back out in the lobby and they give each other a look, because the nurse, or the nurse assistant, I think she is, does see it, see that she sees her, and acknowledges it afterwards. But in the moment, it was this bright, like greeny blue turquoise light. It was so powerful and intense.
What I thought this was it was kind of like a almost flashback of her walking in on her parents or something like that, because it was like it was going down this memory lane with the lighting, and I thought it was going to snap back to her just standing, because she was in the bathroom in front of the mirror at this point. I thought it was going to snap back to that, and it was that was just her, but no, it happened. And she then goes to this woman. She finds out where her family lives, goes to her husband, claims to be an old friend, then has her meet her at a bar and threatens to break up her marriage if she doesn't just, leave and quit her job, essentially. She conveniently makes sure there's a nice fruit basket or whatever it is sent to the head doctor so that he's thinking about her when one of her nurses hasn't shown up. So, we'll have her in for help. And then there's a whole...
They need the help that day, especially because there's press and such.
Yeah, we'll get into why that's going on in a second.
Yeah.
But while she's there, though, she gives drugs to one of the patients, which will basically kill him if not seen to immediately. And she does this so she can save someone's life in front of everyone. She turns him over, makes him throw up.
Prove she's indispensable.
Yes. In front of the press, in front of the governor, so that everyone thinks she's amazing. But this is the thing, I did appreciate this. I appreciated the actual head nurse and the head doctor. It's not that long before they've kind of basically figured out what happened. They're like, no, someone must have gave him something, and then he checks the bottles and he's just it. But she's anticipated this, has Ratched, because she basically tells one of the patients that he's never going to get out, and he might as well kill himself. And it was a much longer speech, but that was essentially the gist of it. I can get you to the head doctor's office because he's got a letter opener that you can use in there. And she's very manipulative. She takes him there. Head doctor is just, he's in the middle of basically saying he knows what's happened. Ratched, you've done this. This is awful. She's denying it, but then they hear a noise. He goes into his office, and in the private bathroom, there's this dead patient lying there. And he starts freaking out. He's in shock because everything he's been building, this negligence of one of his patients, being able to commit suicide, is going to destroy all this press, all this deal he's got with the governor's office for all this expansion and money and blah, blah, blah. And then Ratched, well, now she's like, I'm in on the secret and I'll help you. I'll protect you. As if she's there to be his savior. And all of a sudden, that's it. And then also the governor really likes her and wants her hired and all the rest of it. So that's her. Now she's got a job. So in the course of this episode, she almost killed a man so she could save him, which I thought was where the line was going to be drawn so far.
Which was already like, okay, it's pretty far, but she did actively save him. She had it as under control as I imagine that situation can be.
Obviously, it's stupid and very risky because just because you think you can resuscitate him or you think you can get him to throw the stuff up.
But by the end of it, no one was seriously hurt.
But then she actively convinced someone to commit suicide, which actually seems darker than her just picking up a blade and doing it herself, to be honest. Like, it's actually worse. Yeah,
because it has all that emotional manipulation of someone who is literally mentally ill. That's why they are there.
So, like, this is what. So some of this was fun to watch. When you realize what she's doing, some of these scenes as she's like doing these like little bits of the plans, there is some fun to be had of like that moment where it clicks. You're like, oh, this is what she's doing, or this is what's happening. Yeah. There is a little bit of like, I mean, maybe fun's not the right phrase because some of it's quite dark, but there's a bit of a thrill to. Oh,
there is a dark fun to it.
So it's like, okay, all right, I can see why that stuff kind of works. And I thought the opening scene was kind of fun. We have this, it's the clergy killer, I think they call him later on. He bluffs his way in, this young man, into the, where all these priests are living. Most of them are out, though. They're out seeing Miracle on 34th Street. Because priests all go to see.
They've got a visiting priest from, I think it was Nigeria.
So they all go to the theatre, but the one priest has stayed back because he wants the room to himself so he can look at the lingerie catalogue and knock one out. Which what?
They all have their own rooms as well, with like locks on them as well. So it's just he really wants the privacy. Well,
no, I assumed that some of them shared rooms because I thought there was 2 beds in the room.
Maybe. I know there was at least 3 rooms because when one of the priests goes into his room, it says it comes across saying room 3.
Oh, I'm not saying they're all in one room, but I think he's got a bunkmate, is what I'm saying.
Fair enough.
Otherwise, why else would they need them out the house to?
Yeah, I don't know.
Is he just that gagging for it today that he just no, I'm staying back because I need to,
maybe he is.
I need to knock it out.
It's been a long day.
That's not even the point I wanted to make. The point I wanted to make is that he does it, like, as you see him from behind, he does it while sitting with his legs crossed like a kid, which I'm like, that is the weirdest way to masturbate I've ever seen in my life. What?
That is pretty weird, yeah.
What? It's not even... I don't know, it's weird, alright?
Whatever works for him, I guess.
I don't know, he's sitting on the bed like a kid. Anyway, But when the others get back, they find him dead, and we actually get a relatively violent scene. And I thought the actor who plays the killer here, I thought he was actually quite good at being kind of cheesy in a fun, maniacal way.
He really reminds me of someone. I can't quite put my finger on it.
Yeah, had this evil smile that he had going that I thought was fun enough, again in a sort of pulpy way. So one of the big things is that he's coming to this hospital. He's been brought in by the end of the episode. And it's a big sort of news point in town. The press want to talk about it, even though that's not what they're really there for. It's a big hoopla.
Yeah, it's a big deal because he's made an insanity plea, basically, and that's why they're moving him here instead of to prison.
Yeah, and I kind of, during the opening scene, I was like, okay, that's what this is. This is setting up one of the patients. This is setting up who this guy is. But the big reveal at the end is that when he's brought in, Ratched goes down, and he recognizes her, and they hold hands, and he says he doesn't want to die, which is rich coming from him. And she's like, oh, don't worry. No one's going to hurt you. I'll keep you safe. So...
And it's pretty clear that him moving here was the reason that she forced her way into her job. And it's like, okay, so there's history. There
was a motivation here. She wanted to get here so she could help what am I presuming is her son?
It's, stands to reason.
Yeah, that was the gist I got from it. So, I mean, it's an interesting hook to put on the end of your first episode. It does, like in this first episode, she is made someone commit suicide, intentionally tried to kill someone just so she could save him at the last second, and turns out that she's doing all this to help her serial killer, presumably son. If not son, then someone else she cares about. It doesn't really matter. The point is that she's so far off the deep end in terms of like even remotely thinking, oh, maybe there's a good bone in her body that
yeah, and this is it. Once it got to the, let's call it what it is, murder, assisted murder. Where do you escalate from there? Like, I know you want to have a big flashy, hook, bold statement in your first episode, but this has to run for episodes. At least 2 seasons. It's like, where do we go from here? Which would be higher stakes.
Which would be fine. This would be totally fine if there was other characters that we could root for. I mean, I brought up Vic Mackey earlier. He does something pretty extreme in the first episode. Now, admittedly, that series adds a lot of depth to him as a character, right? Almost immediately. Like in the episodes following, he has a lot more depth than anything else. But even in episode 1, there's other good characters who you're starting to root for other reasons. So you kind of feel like you've been introduced to the characters who are also going to take him down. Whereas none of the characters that are in this, who oppose her, they're either also villainous and skeevy, or they're just kind of like there as the unlikable, people in her way and what she's doing, rather than being there for us to want to catch her.
Yeah, there's the other nurse who doesn't do anything wrong. She's just not very likable, right? She's pretty unlikable, in fact, because for the most part it feels like she's in the way for Ratched. And early in the episode you're assuming you kind of want her to succeed, right? Because she hasn't done anything that bad yet. But by the end it's like, I mean, you presented her as unlikable, but now I don't really like Ratched either, so that doesn't really work. The doctor is just spineless, and again, he's not like an obstacle in the way for the most part. He's just something to manipulate, but he doesn't really have much going for him himself either. Yeah.
So I feel like Ryan Murphy's shows really have a trend for me at this point, which is they have a lot of style and there's definitely a poppy feel to it, but I ultimately don't have much depth in these characters. And
I think style over substance describes Ryan Murphy pretty much exactly.
Yeah. And they're not like the worst examples of characters. There's definitely less substance in other things. There's definitely examples you can bring up that are even more like paper thin, but this is just, just sitting, just teetering on that line.
Yeah.
Just teetering on that line. So, needless to say, I don't think we'll be looking any further into it. But, but we kind of expected that, to be honest. We kind of committed this one knowing that we probably weren't going to be in love with it.
The trailer was much flashier than this episode was as well, which has me almost concerned, because I'm like, okay, a lot of the really flashy stuff is still to come. I'm like, this is already borderline. Okay, it's sometimes it was like too far with the lights and stuff, and I'm like, okay, what's it covering up? Because I already felt there wasn't like much character depth, to attach to already. I'm like, okay, but then it's got more up its sleeve to cover yet.
Yeah. I would say check it out if you're interested though, because I feel like if this scratches a certain niche, I can see a lot of people really liking this.
I think it probably has an audience. If you like other Ryan Murphy shows as a rule, I suspect you'll very much like this.
Yeah, very possibly. Even if you haven't tried Ryan Murphy shows, though, I feel like if you have enjoyed the sound of what we're saying about this devious character pulling all this shit and getting away with it, if that type of show you're into, then you might like this because it is fun and poppy and gives you spades of that. If that's the case, then, knock yourself out. You might like it. But that is episode 1 of Ratched. So, yeah, let us know what you thought of the episode, or if you watch more of it, feel free to let us know about what your thoughts are of the rest of the season in the comments below. You can like and subscribe. Liking is super important on YouTube and is the free and easy way to support everything we do. But you can, of course, also go to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support us for as little as $1 per month and get yourself some bonuses for your troubles. But otherwise, catch us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?